And welcome, everyone. We have a great turnout. We have people that aren't even on the council. I love that you're here with us. I love that you're here to learn from this. We switched to a quarterly meeting so that in our efforts to really expand upon the context of it and inviting people to join us. This is the COC advisory HPRS HPRS System Advisory Council meeting. Now try that 10 times fast. Yeah. And I can turn my camera on. And I look forward to this discussion, a very robust discussion today. So we're going to start with Chris Schutte is Chris on a land acknowledgement?
Allison, I'm somewhere very noisy. If you could pass to someone else.
Okay. Who is available? We have it. We can put up here.
This is Roger. I can do it from the office.
Okay. Thanks, Roger.
A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture and appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. As we begin this meeting, we respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascan people. The Dena'ina have stewarded this land for thousands of years and continue to do so today. We honor the ongoing connection to this land, waters, and community. We recognize the enduring presence and contributions of Alaskan Native peoples across the state and are committed to uplifting indigenous voices, histories, and leadership. As a collaborative group working to support and house members of our community, we acknowledge the legacy of colonization and its ongoing impacts, and we affirm our responsibility to promote equity, justice, and partnership with the indigenous peoples of this region.
Thank you, Roger. And Jess,
yes,
will you enlighten us with a mission moment?
Sure. So I think the thing I'd like to highlight with for a mission moment this month is a bit, it's going to seem weird. I really want to highlight the partnership and collaboration that happened through the past couple weeks of our crazy cold snap here. So what we saw happen were people jumping in to provide whatever they could to help get us through that. The municipality was able to, in emergency circumstances, bypass some of their procurement requirements. We turned on additional shelter beds. We expanded the beds that were offered at the safety center to expand over to the transit center. Beans Cafe, Scott jumped in and kept his facility open all day. Over here at the coalition, we opened our doors, had people here during the day. We just really made it a space to where if somebody needed to be inside, we had a place for them to go, particularly during the day. And so I think that's something that really shows the spirit of Alaska and the spirit of Anchorage and just all of our hearts that are doing this work. It was bitterly cold. Many of us were dealing with issues with our own house and our own lives in relation to that cold. It happened over a holiday period where a lot of people had closures of their offices planned or staff that had time off and really just rallying around that. No one had to do that. We did it because we wanted to, and we did it because we knew it was the right thing to do. So I just want to highlight that it's not a specific mission moment, but it's really what kept me going when I was thinking about just how cold things were, was that, you know, we're doing everything we can, and we have people jumping in and working all hours of the night to make sure that people are taken care of.
Yeah, and I would say it's a wonderful mission moment because, you know, in addition, you were able to help us with some resources on cold weather gear. And even as you know, recent as yesterday, I watched a young person come in almost wearing shorts and was able to get some snow pants and I mean, it was just there was the realization of what our climate is like, right, is very real. And I just appreciate everybody coming together to really make our community a little better. It's a wonderful mission moment, Jess. Okay, so we have before us the consent agenda. And here is our agenda. And I am seeking a motion to approve the consent agenda and the minutes for the October meeting. And if there's any changes or updates to the January, please voice them now.
This is Dave. I'll move to approve.
Thanks, Dave.
Roger, I'll second at the office, and Will's joined us at the office as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so Jess, what we've all been waiting for is for someone to explain to us what the heck is going on with the HUD NOFO. And I'm always saying that a bit in humor, but you have done a great job over the last couple of weeks, keeping us informed, changing the information, keeping us informed again. And now would like for you to present to council, community members, anybody watching or watching at a later date, what the update is on the 2025 HUD NOFO.
And I think something I want to preface this with is it's so fitting that I've been putting together like some talking points and some bullet points and putting together a calendar. And of course, it has changed already this week. So I find that just so perfect. So I think what I'm going to do with you guys first is walk you through a little bit of a timeline of what's happened as part of this NOFO process, and then talk about where we are right now, and then talk about what's coming next.
Okay.
So to tell this story, I have to go all the way back to 2024 and start with the issuance of the 2024 COC NOFO, COC Continuum of Care, NOFO Notice of Funding Opportunity. So when HUD has these funds available for our Continuum of Care, they release what's called a NOFO, and then we have to compete to get that money. And it happens every year. So in 2024, when HUD released that NOFO, they released it as a 2-year NOFO. And they said, you know what? We want to give you guys 2 years worth of this work right now. So you do it once, and then we renew your grants when it comes to 2025. And everyone said, thank the Lord, we've been asking for this. It was great. Then comes November 13th, 2025. And HUD says, you know what, we're going to rescind the 24-25 NOFO, and we're going to issue a new NOFO for those 25 funds. So, 24, they said, you'll apply for these grants, you'll renew them for 1 year, and then we'll do this application process, this competition again. In 25, they said, nah, we're going to do a whole new competition. But I think more importantly, when that NOFO was released, it was a 180 shift from what the previous year NOFO and the past decades worth of NOFOs have looked like. So that threw communities for a loop. It threw our community for a loop. And we said, whoa, we've got to rethink what our programs look like. What does this look like for us? So while we started buckling down and planning for what this is going to look like, talking with the existing grantees about how we might shift existing projects, what might be open for new projects, at that same time, 2 organizations, the National Alliance to End Homelessness, or NAEH, and the National Low Income Housing Coalition, or NLICH, those 2 organizations were joining forces along with a cohort of other nonprofit organizations, and they were filing a lawsuit against HUD. So they filed that lawsuit and claimed in that lawsuit, the basis for that lawsuit was around the administrative nature of rescinding that NOFO and issuing a new one. There is a pretty extensive administrative code which dictates how funding gets released and how competitions happen. And around this particular funding, there's some really strict timelines as to when you can do that. And the basis of this lawsuit was that, among other things, HUD missed the timeline. They had a certain period of time they were allowed to do this, and that time period had passed. So while that lawsuit was happening and being filed in the initial filings coming forward, a lot of continuum of cares, ours included, were faced with this. What should we do? Should we keep going as planned? Should we pause the whole process? You know, what should we do here? We kept going. We figured this is work that we should be doing, conversations we should be having. We continued with that process. On December 8th, right before a court hearing date, HUD withdrew that 25 NOFO. So that NOFO that they'd released November 13th, they pulled it back. They said, we got to make some changes to this. Again, communities had to make some decisions. All right, that's been pulled. What are we going to do? Are we going to pause all of our work? Are we going to keep going? What are we going to do? We decided to do a little bit of a mix. We continued with the process of collecting those applications, working with individuals and applicants on projects that they might be working on, and having those collaborative community conversations in anticipation of seeing what the court would say. On December 19th, HUD reissued a new 2025 NOFO. That new NOFO that was issued had many of the same challenges as the existing NOFO that they had already withdrawn. It changed some things around how some of the renewal funding would work, but ultimately at its core, it was not the same NOFO. It had the same deficiencies as the initial NOFO had. So on December 23rd, that judge who heard all of those initial pleadings on this case issued what's called a preliminary injunction, which is just a fancy word for saying pause. I'm looking at Will, the lawyer, across the table from me too. He's going to correct me if I get any of these weird legal terms wrong. And said, you've got to restore that 24-25 NOFO. That's what was on the books. It's what you guys have to do. And then gave HUD some pretty specific instructions saying, look, this is a preliminary injunction. This is not a ruling on this case. We've not said case closed, you win, you lose, any of that. But while this pause is in place, you need to, HUD, give some instructions to the grantees on what they would need to be doing if they were renewing their grants, if this process were the 24-25 NOFO process in place. And you have some deadlines to give them those instructions. So HUD said, okay. The judge did say that if HUD wanted to reissue a NOFO or do anything like that, if the other party agreed to it and they all said, like, this is we both agree to this, that could happen. But that didn't happen. So what we got was our first set of instructions on December 30th. And then just this week, more detailed instructions around that. So, timeline. Where we are now, we have this set of instructions that HUD has issued on what COCs need to do to have their funds renewed under the original process of the 24-25 NOFO. This does not require that HUD actually issue any of those grants. It doesn't require that they obligate any funding to any of these grants. But what it's intended to do is, based on the outcome of this lawsuit, have HUD already be prepared to issue them. So if the ruling comes that these renewal grants need to be issued, the work is already done. The argument was made that HUD will have to do that anyway. And so they should have this process in place. It doesn't cost them anything to do this. And the judge agreed and had them do that. So what we have now is a set of instructions in front of us to follow, waiting for the final ruling of the judge. This is Jessica's not legal opinion here. The judge was not happy with HUD during this. Most of the arguments were upheld's not the word, but in the court ruling, the words that they used were they had a high likelihood of being granted. Like they had a high likelihood of being found meritorious, I think is the actual term that they used. And so most continuum of cares and ours are proceeding as if these are the instructions for us to follow, and this is what we will be doing. So there were two sets of instructions that came forward. One of them is the path that we would take if we had funds that we were reallocating. So if we had someone who had a renewal grant who did not want to renew their grant, and so we had their money to give to someone else, that's one path that we would follow. The other path is if everybody who got a grant under that 24-25 NOFO said, I want to renew my grant and I want to renew it exactly how it was. That's the second path. So as soon as we had these instructions, reached out to the 4 grantees, said, if you do not want to renew your grants, please let me know ASAP, because that means we're taking path number 1. Everyone wants to renew. So we are taking path number 2. Path number 2 is the easier path because everyone is wanting to renew. There is a little bit of up in the air right now on whether or not those renewal grantees actually have to do anything in eSnaps. One set of instructions said no, and then there was some fuzziness on what's actually available in eSnaps. I don't think they will need to, but we will have clarification before the due date on that. The due date is February 9th. So I anticipate we'll get some clarification next week. We do have questions out to HUD along with many other continuums of care on how that will work. But the instructions from HUD, we do not have to do a new collaborative application. Since we are not replacing or reallocating any funds, we do not have to do a new priority listing. So if there is anything required to be submitted through eSnaps, it will be that those existing grantees, and I think all of the existing grantees are on, and this will be a familiar process for you. You will open up your application in eSnaps, you will import your 24 information, and you will hit submit. And then that is it. It is into HUD. We are not gathering it as a collaborative application. I don't even think you have to do that process, but we'll have clarity next week. The one question that is still outstanding that I have, and Balance of State has, other grantees have, is not wanting grantees who are renewing their grants to be punished for having any kind of language in that grant application from 24 that could be found troublesome in the future. So one of the key points of the 2025 NOFO that was then rescinded and then reissued and then rescinded again, was that they made it very clear they were reserving the right to look back at your previous documents, your previous grants, your previous websites, your previous materials that you had. And if they found evidence that you had done a whole list of activities, most of them centering around equity work, but some of them around things like harm reduction, safe use sites, things like that, that they would use that to disallow you for funds. So there are some concerns that people have that if they just resubmit their 24 applications, which, as we know, in that 24-25 NOFO, there was, I'm going to say, bonus points for equity activities. So every single grant was full of equity language and talking about how those projects were equitable. So that could be really problematic for a lot of grantees if that language could be held against you. So that is, those are the two question marks that we still have up in the air. That's where we're sitting right now in this. We did communicate out with anybody who had applied for the bonus funds and let them know that this is the process. We don't have funds to reallocate in our continuum of care. So as of right now, we don't have any opportunity for bonus projects. There is two areas where we could have this potential upcoming. One is that when HUD issued this 25 NOFO, they did it using the budgeted funds for the 25 continuum of care grant activities. They also took 2024 recaptured funds, actually I think it was 2023 recaptured funds that were unspent funds from previous years of continuum of care funds. And then they also took the continuum of care builds or the COC builds funding that was set to be awarded in 2025. And they pulled that all together as part of that NOFO. Those two extra pieces, those two extra pots of money could surface in many different ways. And so if they surface as a separate NOFO or a separate funding competition, we will be first in line letting all of those applicants know that there is money available. The other opportunity is that while this NOFO was rescinded, this court case is happening, it sounds like we're going to just all see renewal of our 24 grants. What we would be seeing happen here in the summer of 26 is a FY26 NOFO. And I think we'll see that. And I think we'll see it with language that is similar to the NOFO that was rescinded. So making sure that those applicants know that while this opportunity likely doesn't exist, that does not mean that all of these projects don't have an opportunity perhaps later this year to access some continuum of care or other HUD funding, as well as what we always do is promote out anytime there's other funding opportunities. BHAP just closed. We might see BHAP money come next year. There could be municipality participating jurisdiction funding. So anytime there's funding available for these types of projects, we'll make sure that these projects are getting some specific language emails to them, letting them know about this opportunity that could be a good fit. On that, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but advise anyone who isn't already receiving emails from ACH when we do send out email blasts about things like this, either put your email in the chat here or go to our website, scroll all the way down to the bottom and say sign up to receive updates. And then you will get emails whenever any of these things change or new opportunities are out there.
Wow, Jess, I didn't think that could be done so well and concise, and you did. There is time, a few minutes for any questions. You know, the COC advisory is really committed to also transparency in this process. So as soon as we feel like it's not going to change tomorrow, we will be posting, and we can post it now for people to see who are the renewals. You know, HUD's resource is a community resource, and it also gives everyone a kind of a clear indication how this resource is used. One of the difficult to grasp about what I think was most difficult to grasp about the 25 NOFO that HUD was putting forward was going from a 90% continuum of care that supported permanent supportive housing to a 30%. And bringing back things like transitional housing and other type of language. I'm like Jess, I believe that the 26, a lot of that will be in there, and that we still as a community will need to come together and see how we tackle this. But happy to entertain any questions at this point for Jess. Hard ones only, please.
And if you think of them later, I hope everyone on this call knows my email. If not, I'll make sure it gets in the chat. If you think of them later, always feel free to send me an email, and we can chat more about it.
Well, you did a great job navigating us through it. For those that, as we continue to kind of explain, the role of the advisory council is to have the coalition be our lead applicant. So Jess has done a great job keeping us informed on what's going on and being able to have us follow a path of, the best resource for the community. Leslie.
Hi, thanks for the explanation, Jess. That was quite interesting. And just a quick question out of curiosity. When do we think the judge will actually rule on all of this?
I mean, I think in a perfect world before February 9th, because that's the
Okay.
deadline that HUD put forward for this.
Okay.
I think more realistically, we're probably talking about sometime in February or early March. HUD did indicate that this timeline was based on a timeline of them issuing grant agreements before the end of May. So,
Mhm.
yeah. I think we don't quite know. I think it'll be sometime in February, like towards the middle to the end of February.
Okay, thanks.
Well,
One
you
thing
did
I
so
will
well, you're
also-
just going to get a lot of emails.
Maybe, I'm gonna put it in the chat. One thing that I've really enjoyed, is that because this is in federal court, and it's in Rhode Island is where it is. The Rhode Island, federal court website has, all of the documents available. So you don't have to, go down to a courthouse and pay $5 to get records. You can just access them all online, and then you can see when the new hearings are scheduled. And depending on the type of hearing, sometimes you can watch it on YouTube, which has been quite entertaining. So I will put that link in the chat here as well. But that's a really great resource to see when things are upcoming also and kind of follow the case.
That sounds like a fun afternoon. Okay, why don't we go to our committee reports? Again, you can email Jess if you have any questions on it. And so one of the things that we do have, and we want to let you know, we're adding some things onto the website, is we have a kind of a one pager. I always say one pager and it's back and front. So that kind of technically means a two pager that has a list of all the committees, and then we're going to update it with a contact person and the date and time of the meeting. So anytime you're thinking of, hey, I want to understand what Chris Schutte is doing in that business action committee, then go to this information. It tells you the priorities that have been set through our retreat, as well as we'll give you, not on here now, but we'll give you the date and time that the meetings are. So again, just really working this year to make sure that this is a council that is very inclusive of the entire community. So with that, which committee chair would like to provide an update? First, Chris? Oh, he's in a loud place.
I'll go first. I'm in a loud place. I hope it's not too bad. I will make it short. I will say that the Business Action Committee, Business Advisory Committee, met yesterday, maybe the day before. They all run together, but we met late. And therefore, you don't have the usual summary of the meeting in the packet. I apologize for that. We'll get it out afterwards. One of the key takeaways I did want to highlight is we met the day that the SAMHSA grants were all rescinded. So we talked about that a little bit, although you saw, hopefully you saw today that got pushed back again. So more whiplash from the federal government. But the other thing that we talked about is the business advisory committee is really interested in becoming more of a liaison between the business community and the homeless response system, providing not only updates and information about how the various homeless response interventions are going, but also to make sure that we're communicating back to all of you what the business community is seeing and hearing, and hopefully translating that into action and recruiting more and more businesses to become partners in the homeless response system. Kenny Peterson and I have sort of self-volunteered to lead some of that activity, and working through the membership of the Business Advisory Committee, we're going to start communicating with and appearing in front of boards like the AADC board, the Visit Anchorage board, et cetera, to try and give them a little bit more detail about what not only the Business Advisory Committee does and ways they can be involved, but also about the broader, the COC activities, the different activities of the various providers, et cetera, and really try and become that conduit between those two worlds. Like Allison said, you all should see soon a summary, or sorry, a contact list of how to get a hold of me and when the meeting dates and times are. We would love to have other people pop in. We had a surprise visit from Allison this week, and it brightened everyone's days. So that's it.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Randy, I saw your hand up. Were you going to jump in?
Oh, yes, but I was happy that somebody else went first.
Yeah.
Mine is super brief. We are part of the compliance committee, and we are just now getting it kind of re-going. I think it's been about a year since it has been an active committee. But Olivia and I had initial meetings with Jessica and Yvonne to get up to speed, and our upcoming meeting is going to be focused on getting the bylaws updated and then in front of the full advisory committee for final approval. So we're hoping that we'll have more substantive updates for everybody in the future, but it's taking a lot to kind of get our brain downloaded.
I mean, you're going to get a lot of people joining yours. It's pretty sexy to do bylaws. So
I love bylaws.
But I knew you would be the right person for compliance. So again, the one pager will give kind of what the high points are of each committee and how you reach the person who co-chair or chair of the committees. We try to go on a co-chair model just so that, you know, we all are also full-time jobs, and just so that we do have the ability to expand some of our capacity to make sure that we're attentive and responsive. So thanks a lot, Randy and Olivia, for taking the lead on compliance. Okay, let's see. Who wants to be next?
Well, for Roger here, on behalf of HERAC, we have a set meeting dates and times, and first and third Wednesdays at 4:30. Location will be flexible here at the office, if nowhere less, but to be determined. So appreciate all the help getting us this far, and thank you.
Great, Roger. I think we'll do, you guys, we'll do the community prioritization last, only because then we can kind of go right into the gaps analysis. Is that okay with you?
That's fine.
Okay, so we have data.
Yeah, so this is Susan Lankowski, chair of the Data Compliance Committee. We had a slow end to the year. We didn't get to meet very often. I think we met once, and really that was my first meeting to get that set up. As the chair of the committee, I really want to focus in this new year on figuring out getting the feet of the Data Compliance Committee under us, specifically focusing on data quality, data completeness, and the use of data, homeless services data in the community. So if you're into that kind of stuff, please reach out to me because we are looking for members.
Yeah, I'm telling you, these people are recruiters. You guys watch out. Okay, what about, I think Laura's on. Laura, coordinated entry? She might not.
Laura is not on.
Okay.
There's a note taker for Laura, but not Laura
Okay.
herself.
Laura's note taker. So we will again get the dates on that. I know that committee is being really active, and they're about to come out with just some kind of research studies on, research light, so to speak, on some of the pilot projects that they're doing with coordinated entry. So we will get that information out to you guys, and so that you have it. And then why don't we go to you, Will?
Okay, so for the Community Priorities Committee, one of the things we've been working on is a 2025 gap analysis, which is going to be an upcoming item on the agenda today. As you mentioned, Allison, always looking for co-chairs or vice chairs. We don't have one with the Community Priorities Committee, so I'd love if anyone's interested in that. One of the things that we discussed at this past meeting, this past Monday, was kind of thinking towards this upcoming NOFO, not the one that Jessica talked about, but for kind of 2026, 2027, and working towards the reallocation policy between the Community Priorities Committee and the compliance committees. And so that's going to be an item kind of upcoming on the agenda. So if that is of interest to folks, please join the meetings. The next scheduled meeting is January 26th, but as I was thinking about that, I'm realizing that coincides with the point in time count. So I don't know, would it make sense to potentially cancel the meeting on the 26th and meet on the next meeting?
Yeah, the point in time count is the night of the 26th, so the count work actually happens on the 27th, but there's pretty extensive prep time, so that might be best.
Okay, unless there's any opposition or points, I think we can cancel that meeting. We'll send an email to folks, and the next meeting then will be on February 9th. And these are Monday, 4 to 5 p.m. every other week, and either at the coalition office or on Teams.
So I know that we might not have timed this well, so we have like a ACH report. Jess, do you have anything in addition, government or operations, that you wanted to report out to the group? Or are we ready to go to the gaps analysis for approval?
I have a couple government updates I wanted to give. I just wanted to give an update on federal appropriations. As I think we all know, we had a shutdown at the beginning of this fiscal year. That shutdown ended when there was a continuing resolution passed, which takes us through January 30th of this year. As of today, not all pieces have been funded, but what we call the THUD, or some people call it the THUD, but it's the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. So that the HUD funding, which is where our continuum of care funding comes from, is grouped together with transportation in one funding bill that goes forward. So that is one of the funding bills that has made its way through. It is essentially a continuing resolution level of funding on that. HUD does have some leeway within that appropriations bill in how the funding gets allocated, but that's good news that it's one that's already made it through. Not so great news that it's not like, woohoo, huge increases, but definitely could be worse. Hopefully we see the rest of those funding bills be passed in the next 15 days. Or, we're looking at another shutdown, but wanted to share that on the federal side. On the state side, this week sees a bunch of the House and Senate members headed down to Juneau, getting set up down there and getting started. In early February, you'll see some communications come out, but I'm giving you a bit of a heads up. The annual Housing Advocacy Day will be happening. It's happening at the same time as our first ever in-person Youth Action Board convening down in Juneau. That's really exciting to have our young people all together in one space, working on our youth systems improvement opportunity and grant that we have in conjunction with the Balance of State. So on that Housing Advocacy Day, it is virtual. Anyone who is down in Juneau in person can participate in the second part of Advocacy Day, which is actually visiting those legislators, talking about our legislative priorities. We are close to finalizing some of those advocacy documents. So like I said, watch for that communication, watch for some of those documents, and watch for opportunities to be a great advocate for us down in Juneau and with your local legislators for some of these legislative priorities. We have two main legislative priorities this year. The first one is talking about maintaining stable funding for the HAP funds, or the Homeless Assistance Program funds. Those have been funds that feel like they're in jeopardy every year. And we really want to make sure that those are stable funding for our partners across the state to provide those services. And then a second legislative piece is really focused on the availability of vouchers, how we use vouchers in our state, where we use vouchers in our state, and how we can better facilitate connections to the vouchers that people might be eligible for, and ensure that they're a resource that providers in our HPRS and people who are experiencing homelessness have access to. So that's it, but wanted to give that quick federal and state update for people.
Yeah, and I think, Felicia, I think you have your hand up. Is it a question for Jess?
No, actually, it's kind of more just going along with the Advocacy Day. I participated last year, and I plan on participating this year. And actually, just wanted to kind of put this out there. I just had a meeting, it was about a week ago, with Andy Josephson, Representative Andy Josephson. I went over and was able to meet with him for just a moment. I've been in contact with Alexander Schroeder, his assistant, over the last year and a half. So that the Advocacy Day last year, I actually took the advocacy kind of training. I forgot which entity had provided the Advocacy Day. So definitely, I think, so this is definitely right along the lines of what I've already done and kind of where I'm going already. And being that I already have, a little bit of communication, with the representative, and, I'm so on board. That's my statement. There's no question, just I'm loving it and I'm here for it.
Oh, that's great, Felicia. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I think, did I miss when that day was?
Oh, it is February 3rd and 4th, right? 4th and 5th. I'll move my calendar real
I
quick.
think for Advocacy Day, the
3rd and 4th. So the Advocacy Day training and kind of conference session will be on the 3rd, and then the 4th would be the legislative visits, correct?
I thought the 4th and 5th because of the youth conference
They definitely overlap. I know that.
on the 4th, I think, but we can double check.
I will double check on that. It's that week. It's
Yeah,
either
the-
Tuesday and Wednesday or Wednesday and
First
Thursday.
week of February, right on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, we can check on that and maybe get back by the end of the session here. And now, so Will, why don't we, every year we look at the gaps analysis, we bring it to this committee for a decision or approval, accepting and moving forward on it. So Will, do you want to explain it, or you Jess, or anybody else that wants to help participate? You're welcome to at this time.
Yep. Let me share my screen. Oh, wait. I got it up there. Sweet. So I'm happy to start. Okay, so if you've been part of the advisory council or part of these conversations for a while, you know that one of the things that we try to do every year is a gap analysis. HUD requires that you do one at least every 3 years, but that a lot can happen in 3 years. As we discovered in this process, a lot can happen in 1 year, and a lot can happen in the process. But what that gap analysis does is it takes a look at the need within your community, the resources that you have in your community, and then after that, it's, I will say in air quotes, simple math of what is your need and what is your resources that you have. In most communities, there is an identified need. It's pretty rare for a community to say, you know, we have an excess of resources. And what we do is take a look at that need and those resources broken down into 4 subpopulations. We look at single adults, we look at families, we look at youth and transition age youth, and then veterans. And then we break that down into shelter and transitional housing. So what resources do we have in our community that meet that immediate need? So that emergency shelter, transitional housing resource, and then the longer term permanent needs. So rapid rehousing, supportive housing resources, and then independent units, which would include low income units, and then people who are self-resolving if they have access to that unit that is affordable and accessible to them. So looking across this, breaking down single adults, identified a gap of 356. I'm going to say beds because when you talk about shelter and transitional housing, you're typically talking about beds. But recognize when we get to families, we're usually talking about units. At that point, you don't count family shelter the same way as you do single adult shelters. You're usually talking about units within that shelter. For families, the gap identified was 98. For youth and transition age youth, the gap identified was 90. And for veterans, the gap identified was 58. The asterisk on the veterans is to call out that right now in Anchorage, in order for a resource to be considered dedicated, so we would say like this resource belongs to veterans in that shelter box there. It has to be dedicated, not just dedicated to veterans, but dedicated to veterans who are also experiencing homelessness. We do have some transitional housing, and we have the DOM here in Anchorage that are dedicated resources for veterans, but you do not have to meet the HUD definition of homeless to access those. So those resources aren't included in here. So the asterisk will have a footnote in the kind of formal write-up of this. The methodology behind this, it's a bit complicated, but what we look at is the count overall of people experiencing homelessness in Anchorage using HMIS data. We look at the resources as identified in our housing inventory count, or our HIC. You'll hear it called that. And then we take a look at the average usage. So we look at the beds that we have and what that utilization rate is across them to determine, you know, do we have sufficient resources regardless of whether they're being used or not. For rapid rehousing, supportive housing, and independent units, you'll see those numbers are much bigger. And I think important to understand about the methodology of a gap analysis is that when you're identifying permanent resources, it's encompassing those shelter resources as well, because that person who needs a shelter bed eventually needs a permanent housing resource too. And sometimes they can go directly into that permanent resource, and sometimes they need that shelter first, but recognize that that's encompassing that other number there as well. So you'll see them much higher. Rapid rehousing, just to give a brief definition for everyone here, rapid rehousing resources are interventions that last from 3 to 24 months. It's a maximum of 24 months of assistance. While when we talk about permanent supportive housing or that supportive housing line, that is more intensive long-term resource that includes those intensive supportive services that go along with it. When we talk about independent units, low-income units, and self-resolutions, those are gonna be those units like the subsidized housing units, the Anchorage Affordable Housing and Land Trust units. They might not be units that are dedicated to people experiencing homelessness, but they need to be accessible to people experiencing homelessness. So going across the line on shelter and transitional housing, we have a total gap of 602 beds/units. And then looking at permanent housing, we have a gap of just under 3,000. This is really similar to the gap that we identified for permanent housing in our previous gap analysis. We have not yet seen Anchorage be able to start to close that gap. And we've seen this persist across the state. The lack of development of new affordable housing and supportive housing has really been felt, and we've seen the impact across the state. So continuing with some of that advocacy to not just keep the status quo when it comes to support for that, but really try to expand the resource availability for, those rapid rehousing and supportive housing vouchers, development of low-income units and other types of rental assistance that can come alongside people and help them as they navigate out of homelessness into a permanent housing resource.
Jess, Chris has a question. Said another way, the total number of permanent housing units needed also includes the shelter and transitional housing units. That's not the case. It's, but I'm always confused by the fact that the permanent housing includes rapid rehousing, which isn't necessarily a permanent housing solution.
Yeah, and I think the idea behind permanent housing, in the terms on the gap analysis, is that it's permanent in the sense that the person has a lease, that it was a permanent exit from homelessness, versus a transitional housing where that person might be paying a portion of an occupancy fee, but they don't hold a traditional lease. They don't have those same protections under the landlord Housing Tenant Act. So I think that's the difference. And yes, it's encompassing through there. Yep. I will add on to this one thing we've talked about in the committee and are working towards building into a budget is the ability that every few years having a really intensive gap analysis done. It's really important that every year we look at the trends and we make sure that the resources that we have are going to meet the needs that we have, but doing something more intensive that is more of a research project, takes into account things like census surveys and market trends around housing development and the intersection of healthcare and where residential treatment center might fit into this, I think is really important. So that is one thing we did decide on this year, is that we wanted to make sure that we were prioritizing that to have every few years a more in-depth gap analysis done.
Yes, does supportive housing include assisted living?
It only would include assisted living if there was assisted living that was dedicated to people experiencing homelessness.
Okay.
And right now, Anchorage does not have any of that. But if anyone is interested in developing that, let's talk.
Okay. I agree. At some point, what we're doing will need to get a little more advanced and really so that this language becomes the community's language about what need is, right?
Yep.
And the type of housing that is needed. So I support that. So at this point, went through the community prioritization. They approved and put forward to this body to approve this as our 2025 gaps analysis. And I promise there were a lot of smart people in that committee, digesting all these numbers. So.
Am I allowed to just make a comment for the record?
Totally.
Outside of the vote?
Yeah.
I know there was a lot of smart people, and I do not argue with the results at all. I would love for the future for us to talk about if there are additional categories that should be pulled out in addition to youth and TAY and veterans, specifically around obviously domestic violence, since that's what I'm representing. Just because we know through other research the strong connection between domestic violence and homelessness, and the unique additional needs, specifically around safety in any of these housing options. And so I just wanted to, when I put in my vote, it's going to be yes, and I would love for that to be on the record for future.
Yeah, duly noted. It's definitely talked about every year, Randy, that is a missing piece of it. So I think we're getting to the point where our next year step is a bigger version of this, where it's a little more comprehensive. You know, you have to minimally include these items, but it doesn't necessarily say we couldn't add additional columns, right? For the purpose of our community and our understanding of the intersection.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And Randy, I wrote that down, and I heard you during the committee meetings too. One thing that I think we learned this year too, veterans used to only have its own column in the permanent housing line. And this year, working with Kim, I don't know if she's on, or Daniel, we worked with ICA to really look at how we could parcel out that veteran number, because as we know, veterans cross all three of the other subpopulations, as do survivors of domestic violence. So we really learned a lot about how we look at that data and how we could pull that out. So have definitely noted that and agree that that is a population that is underserved and needs to be looked at.
Well, thanks, Will. Thanks, Jess. Do I have a motion to approve this?
I motion
This
to
is
approve it.
Will. I'll second.
That's, I didn't quite catch that. I'm sure Mitch did though, right?
I believe Will made the motion and Susan seconded, or vice versa.
That works.
Okay. Any additional questions on it? With that being said, can we, I guess we vote, right? Thumbs up, or why don't we do react, like thumbs up?
I'm launching a poll
Oh,
now.
there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so good.
And for
Simple,
anyone
simple.
who is in the meeting that isn't an advisory council member, know that you can vote on this as well. So just to throw that out there. Don't think that you can't vote.
Yep.
Oh, well, Roger's vote.
Roger.
Yes.
Okay, while the vote is going on, do we have any members of the public that have any questions or comments that they would like to make to the council?
Nope.
Okay.
Right.
And how about any good news? And oh, there you go. Sorry, Felicia.
Yeah, that actually, I don't know if this, I was hoping that I could actually come in and kind of get a walkthrough of the process. You know, when I was actually homeless myself, I did the, I did the coordinated entry over the phone, but I kind of want to do, you know, the physical actually when people walk into the office, you know, what is it that they see? Just so I can kind of get a foundation of, you know, because my experience is different than someone who lives out on the street. I was homeless, but I didn't live on the street. So I kind of would like to get, you know, their perspective. I have mine, and is that a possibility, or?
Yeah, this is Jessica. Absolutely. We have multiple access points across the city too. But the ACH office is one, and I would love to welcome you here and have you be able to be here for a period of time and kind of see how they're done in person, and watch some interactions. So if you want to shoot us, actually, I think you might have been emailing with Lisa already, right?
Yeah.
We'll
is
make sure we
correct.
get you some of that information, and we'll get something set up.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. I think we at least put in the information about the advocacy opportunity coming up. It's on the February the 4th. Is the Advocacy Day training. I'm not sure about the youth piece of it, but we definitely will get information out to you. Here you go. Here are some additional opportunities. Again, we're really trying to go to the website. We're really trying to get COC information available so that people realize this is a community council, right? And that we really are representing, but are kind of responsible to the community to be transparent in our process. So make sure you check out the link if you haven't of all the information. It has all the list of the committee members, and we're working on some additional stuff. So with that being said, any comments closing for the good of the council?
Just a
Bylaws are
reminder
fun.
I just wanted to give a reminder to everyone that like Will was mentioning, the point in time count is the night of the 26th.
Yep.
On the 27th, we'll be performing the actual point in time count. If anyone online wants to be part of that, let me know and I'll connect you with Mac, who is putting together some scheduling. The point in time count doesn't necessarily mean going out in the woods with your bunny boots and your wool hat. There are opportunities for people at various locations, including like the library, where people go during the day. It's a pretty simple survey. We give you some snacks to give out to people, and it can be a really fun time. So if you're interested in that, reach out and I'll make that connection.
And our next meeting is April the 16th. Again, monthly meetings of committees and quarterly meetings of the full council.
And Allison, real quick before we adjourn, just want to say, a big thank you to you for your leadership, all the hours you pour into this, to all of our committee chairs who are doing hard work and coordinating behind the scenes, Jessica, everyone who's taking the time. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's leadership.
Thanks, Gabe. Okay. Everybody have a safe night out there. I hear conditions are going to be slippery, so take care, okay?